Hello, we have a call-in user. If you could please unmute yourself and let us know who you are.
Hi, this is Lena Reese with CAMPO. I'm having an issue with the app on my computer, so I'm calling in.
No problem. We'll get your name changed.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I'm looking and I'm counting. I think we're close to a quorum. We'll give it one or so more minutes to make sure that everybody that's going to join us gets an opportunity to do that.
Sounds good, Commissioner. We will wait for that. We are recording and live streaming now as well.
Okay, I think I see a quorum of folks that have popped up. I'll read through who I've seen and, or actually I can go shorter. I'll tell you who I think is not here. I don't see Commissioner Beckett. I don't see Judge Brown. I don't see Mayor Hill or Councilmember Cannon. I don't see Commissioner Jones. I don't see Judge Oakley, and I don't see Mayor Schrader. But I think I've got everybody else that I've seen pop on. So we'll note that, and I will go ahead and call the February CAMPO meeting to order at 2:05. Welcome. And I don't believe we have had anyone sign up for public comments. And so if you will indulge me for a second, I'm going to jump down to number 9, which is Transportation Policy Board Chair announcements. And I think Ashby has a quick announcement. Ashby, if you want to, are you on, Ashby? Okay, if you want to pop on and talk about the award, I think it'd be fun to start off the meeting with a good thing.
So, can y'all hear me? Okay, thank you. So, taking y'all back towards the end of last year, and last November, October, the policy board voted to to create an open roads policy that came out of the work that we did for the regional incident management plan. And if you can see, this is glass, but you know, It's an award. We've already received an award for this work from the Texas Intelligent Transportation System Board of Directors. So we received the award November 10th, and I finally got the plaque a few weeks ago from them, but wanted to say congratulations to the board for one, for the award, but also once again for being the first MPO in the country, to our knowledge, and to ITS Texas knowledge as well, for creating an open roads policy that can be used to improve safety throughout the region.
So that's exciting news. Congratulations to the whole policy board for that. And then I also want to defer over to Tucker Ferguson, our district engineer, for just a moment. Tucker?
Thanks, Chair Long. I just wanted to spend a few minutes and talk about an upcoming event that begins tomorrow. And it's the Texas Transportation Forum 2021. And it's around this time of year, every year leading up to the forum, where TxDOT makes some recognition and announcements. And the one that I'm going to mention today is the TxDOT Road Hand Award, created in 1973. And it's TxDOT's highest tribute to the citizens who make transportation in Texas the best system in the nation. And this year, I just learned recently that we'll be honoring later on this week someone who's very familiar to all of us, and the CAMPO Executive Director, Ashby Johnson, has been awarded the 2021 Road Hand Award. Just a little bit of background: since joining CAMPO in 2014, Ashby's been instrumental to the development of the region-wide transportation planning network in Central Austin, including projects of significance like Oak Hill Parkway in Southwest Austin, US 183 flyover project, which will transform travel between I-35 and US 183 in Austin, and the largest one in years to come, the I-35 Capital Express program. But outside of that normal job, Ashby also serves on the Transportation Research Board, which is a division of the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. He's been an active member of the American Association Metropolitan Planning Organization since 1996. And through his work and more, he's helped TxDOT achieve great things. And on a personal level, I've been able to work side by side with Ashby since my arrival at TxDOT in 2011, when he was at the Houston-Galveston Area Council and helped us out in the Beaumont District as well as the Houston District. So in recognition of his efforts for transportation in Texas, we'll be honoring him later on this week at the forum starting tomorrow. And with this award, Ashby's name will be inscribed on a plaque that sits in the lobby of the Greer Building. And just want to pass along the congratulations to Ashby, and we'll be presenting this award to him in a more formal way in the next upcoming week. So Ashby, congratulations. And I think we'd like to give you a moment to make any comments.
Well, Ashby, before you do, I just wanted to say CAMPO is blessed to have you as our executive director. And I am so proud that TxDOT has recognized your contributions and value to the region and to the state. Congratulations on being named a road hand. We are so proud. And then I also have a couple of comments from our former chair, Will Conley. He says, congratulations, Ashby. Your hard work and dedication to the NPO, our region, and the state has been like no other that has held your position. Your public service has significantly helped make our community a better place by helping us prepare for the present, but most importantly, our future. Welcome to the club, my friend, and I look forward to celebrating with you in the near future. That was from former Chair Conley. So Ashby, now if you have any comments.
Well, first, I'm surprised. That was a well-kept secret. I certainly didn't expect it, and I'm very humbled by this recognition. And you know, some of you don't know, but I started out my career working at TxDOT back in the early '90s for a little while, and they would have the annual meetings and they would announce the road hands, and I always wanted to be a road hand, but I never thought it would happen. So I'm very thankful. And I wish my grandmother was here to see it.
Well, we are very proud and excited for you, and your contributions just make CAMPO look that much better. So thank you, Ashby. So I'll go back to the regular agenda now. And as I said, we don't have any public comments. We have no executive session. So I will move to item number 4, which is discuss and take appropriate action on the January 11th meeting minutes. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Okay, Councilmember Mateo, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Terrio. See, I'm getting pretty good at recognizing people's voices. So we have a motion and a second on the meeting minutes from January 11th. Is there any discussion? Is there anyone against the motion? Okay, motion is approved unanimously. Item number 5, discuss and take appropriate action on the CAMPO Executive Director to begin negotiation on the Regional Transit Coordinating Committee 5-year plan update contract. Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Chair. If Emily, if you'll go to the next slide. Thank you. So this item is to request authorization for us to negotiate a consultant contract to update the regionally coordinated 5-year plan. And just to remind everyone that CAMPO administers the Regional Transit Coordination Committee, which is a multi-jurisdictional, multi-partner committee for transit, which really looks at coordinating the transit services in the region between private providers, between Capital Metro, CARTS, the City of Round Rock, San Marcos, as well as health and human services providers. And so this, excuse me, I'm getting a little feedback on my end. And so this every 5 years, the Regional Transit Coordination Committee updates a 5-year plan, and this is really their implementation guide that really guides their actions over the next 5 years. And it also helps inform how the 5310 funding is administered, which is the criteria that we approved last month. And so we issued a request for proposals back in November 2020. And so the update for the planning period will cover from 2022 to 2026. And the current plan that we have was adopted back in 2017 and expires towards the end of this year. We did receive a grant from TxDOT's Public Transportation Division. It's FTA 5304 funding, and this contract will authorize up to $94,000 worth of funding. And once we award the contracts and begin the negotiations, we expect this project will take at least 12 months to complete from notice to proceed. If you'll go to the next slide, please. So this is our standard evaluation process that we use for all our planning products. We've used it for the last several years, and there's up to 100 points available for the proposals that are submitted. And then based on the criteria, based on the scores on the proposals, we will invite the top ranked firms to interview for an additional 25 points. And so this is just a summary of that evaluation process here. You'll go to the next slide, please. And then finally, we have the evaluation results. We did receive 5 responses to the request for proposals. Nelson Nygaard, the Goodman Corps, KFH Group, Moore and Associates, and SRF. And so the evaluation committee scored all 5 of these proposals, and then we invited the top 3 firms to participate in interviews. That was Nelson Nygaard, the Goodman Corp, and KFH. And then based on the final scores, the top ranked firm is Nelson Nygaard with a score of 97 points. And so with authorization of this item, we will begin negotiations with Nelson Nygaard to begin updating the plan. And that concludes the presentation. And if you have any questions, I'll take them now.
Does anybody have any questions of Ryan?
Chair, I have a brief question.
Councilmember Kitchen.
Yes, could you just, for the public understanding, just briefly explain what the scope is of the Regionally Coordinated Transportation Plan?
Absolutely. There's really 3. The main end product of the scope of work is the updated 5-year plan, but there are a couple of pieces in there that are critical to building that plan out. And one is it's really an inventory of transportation services in the region. And so we'll be reaching out. Oh, and one thing I should mention is this plan covers 10 counties as opposed to the 6 in the CAMPO region. So That's an important factor, but what we do is we take an inventory of all the transportation resources in the region. So that looks at, the city-run services, government services, health and human services, transportation providers, and also really the private transportation providers. There's a lot of those, and so it's a great thing that we do, that we just look at all. It's basically a comprehensive resource that anybody can look at and find the services they need. The other piece is there's a gap analysis. So there are often gaps between CART's service area and Cap Metro's service area, and that'll of course change when the census comes out as well. But we look to identify those gaps in the planning area, and then also lay out strategies that can address those gaps. And so that's what, and within the final plan, you'll have some performance measures and some goals that will kind of outline what the RTCC and what CAMPO can also do to really address those gaps. And so that's the main scope of work. So you'll have the inventory, you'll have the gap analysis, and then finally you'll have the ultimate plan at the end of it that pulls everything together.
So would it be fair to say, one of the things that impresses me about this plan is that, a lot of times we have gaps and or overlaps in the private sector in terms of services that are made available for seniors and underserved communities, and this helps coordinate those services. Would you say that that's fair to say?
Yeah, that's absolutely what it does. It's a coordination resource, and the RTCC, they meet on a quarterly basis and really look at and see how they can implement the plan. That's really the function of the RTCC. And then also, as far as this policy board is concerned, we allocate the 5310 funding, and that's really the teeth of the plan as well, because the projects that are awarded through 5310 have to be listed in this plan, and typically they are addressing those gaps. So it's a great service. And we just did a transit plan last year as well, and that will build on that. And then we've also got Project Connect as well. So it's really going to be a synergistic effort between all of the planning efforts in the region for transit.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Is there a motion for approval on item number 5?
I'll move approval. This is Commissioner Shea, and then I have a question after a second.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, who was that? Sorry.
In kitchen.
Okay. Commissioner Shea, you said you had a question?
Yeah, does our TCC also incorporate into it, I don't know if it's still going to be called Community Solutions, but the effort at transportation demand management?
Is that absolutely that will certainly be part of the planning process.
Okay, because I'll look forward to an update on it. This has been kind of a project, I don't know if it's fair to call it in limbo, but it was offered to be completely eliminated when we were identifying projects to release money on for the I-35 project. I think we kept it, but I would like an update on it at some point, perhaps on a future agenda, Madam Chair.
Okay. I would too. Thank you for bringing it up, Commissioner Shea.
I believe the TDM proposals have been out, and that will be coming back to the board shortly. I think that's the program you're referring to. So I think we'll be getting an update on that pretty soon in March. So
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Okay. Are there any other questions? All right. Seeing none. Is there anybody against the motion? Okay, thank you. Motion passes unanimously. Item number 6, discuss and take appropriate action on prioritization process for Category 7 deferred projects. And this is Mr. Collins again. Just by way of reminder, this is sort of a wrap up. We've talked about this for several meetings, and it's been to the TAC several times. But Ryan, if you'll back clean up for us on this, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you'll go to the next slide, please. So as Chair Long mentioned, this is the item that we brought to you for discussion last month, and we've kind of had ongoing discussions about the process essentially since June. So back in June, I know we have a couple of new board members even from last month, and want to remind everyone, so back in June, we did the I-35 deferral process where we deferred some projects to defer that funding to I-35, but as part of that process, we did, it was determined to prioritize the projects that had been deferred for refunding when we do have additional funding come into the CAMPO proverbial bank account, I would say. So we put together a prioritization process really to address this prior to any funding coming in. And so it's a pretty simplified process. The meat of it is really at the readiness evaluation. But really, we're going to look at funding. Funding comes in and is staggered in. We receive funding, at the beginning of each fiscal year. And so we'll be looking at that funding availability and to see how much we have available. And we'll determine a preliminary list of projects for consideration. Now, you do have a full list in your backup materials of all the projects that were deferred in June. And so we'll be looking at that list and seeing how much funding we have available and to see which ones we can actually fund if we have enough. And then this is really going to be there's going to be a major push for coordination with sponsors to determine interest in funding and also the initial status of the project as it's been deferred. So that's going to be something that's going to be a huge push over the next couple of months at least. So we'll be coordinating both with the sponsors and TxDOT to really update that deferred list that's in your backup materials to get the most up-to-date information. And then finally, the meat of the prioritization process is readiness. We'll evaluate, and now readiness is something that we evaluated when we initially selected these projects. And I've got a slide coming up that I'm going to talk a little bit more about readiness and how that impacts when a project will get prioritized. But readiness is really what's going to determine which projects get refunded first. We want to ensure that the projects that are ready to use the funding when it's available. And then if projects have similar readiness evaluations and scores, if they are similarly ready, we will use evaluation scores to prioritize projects based on score if they are ready at the same time. If you'll go to the next slide, please. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time on readiness. I know we had a couple of questions last month. I think either Councilmember Alter or Kitchen, and rightly so. Readiness is a really important step that we look at when we evaluate these projects. And so on the left, you'll see this is the project development process, and this is really this is based on TxDOT's process, and it's a long process. You really start with the AFA, and then you move into preliminary engineering design. You also go through the federal NEPA process, right-of-way acquisition and utility relocation, and then you finalize the projects. And at that point, you go to letting and construction. And so these are all the steps that we look at when we evaluate a project. And so, and one thing that's important is that all the projects, with the exception of a few of them, when we awarded them, they were awarded for construction. And so sponsors can look at preliminary engineering, can complete preliminary engineering design as well as the environmental process, even while they're waiting to be refunded. And so that's, I know there will be a couple of questions on that. And then readiness is also dependent on the phase in which we awarded the funding. As I mentioned earlier, the majority of the projects that we awarded that are deferred are construction projects. There are a few studies that were deferred as well, and the only thing they need to go through is to develop the AFA, and then they can be obligated. And there was one preliminary engineering project, I think it was Cap Metro's grade separation project, and so the readiness for those projects are essentially ready now. All they have to do is develop the advanced funding agreement, and then they can move forward. But the other construction projects, we'll be revisiting how far along they are in the right-of-way acquisition, if they completed the NEPA process, and that will really determine how quickly they can spend the money. So that's why this is the primary focus of the prioritization process. If you'll go to the next slide, please. And as I mentioned earlier, CAMPO does receive an annual allocation of SDBG federal funding. Now, this table on the left is an estimate. We project out based on historical precedent. We know how much we get from the FAST Act and continued federal authorization. So so this table is not, set in stone by any means. But what we'll be doing is, as these funds come in, we'll be matching the federal funds by fiscal year to ensure that the projects are utilizing this funding as it becomes available. And so projects, as I mentioned earlier, if projects will be grouped by fiscal year. So if we have 4 projects that are ready within the federal fiscal year 2023. And we don't have enough money to fund all of them. We'll prioritize the ones that are that have the higher evaluation score. And so if you'll go to the next slide, please. And so finally, really the next steps after approval of this item, we're going to coordinate with the sponsors and TxDOT to update the deferred project list. I think after we sent it out on Monday, I had a good call with Brandon Marshall at TxDOT. I know some of the information is already out of date. We know some of the project sponsors have moved forward with their projects under their own funding. And so those projects can be pulled off the deferral list. But those are things, and I know we've had conversations with sponsors as well, but we're going to kind of do an official evaluation of every single project on there and determine interest and where the project is. And then finally, we'll update all this information in a project prioritization report. This will include the detailed information on the refunding process with the updated project statuses. And then we'll also look at the anticipated upcoming funding availability. I think those are really the two outstanding questions: is how soon can we refund these deferred projects, and when can we have another project call? And a lot of that is really going to depend on the project cash flow over the next few years. And so we're going to do a detailed analysis with that in partnership with TxDOT, so we can really get a good understanding of when we can start knocking these projects off of this deferred project list. And so if there are any, I'm sure there are some questions on this. So that really concludes the presentation, but I will be taking any questions now. Thank you.
So if we can get a motion and a second on the floor, and then we'll dive into discussion. So just to, I'll move that we approve item number 6.
Houston will second.
Thank you. Okay, so there's a motion and a second on the floor, and I see Councilmember Alter has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, and thank you, Ryan, for this overview. And I'm going to try and ask this. It might be a little technical, but hopefully this will make sense. So the project prioritization, as it's outlined by CAMPO, focuses on readiness, and as part of that is the review of the AFAs and the FPAAs in determining the project readiness. It's my understanding that when projects were deferred last year, our city staff met with TxDOT staff to determine options forward, and the two options were to terminate the AFA or to amend it to no longer include federal funding. Since AFAs are not required to move a project forward with local dollars, but do cost local sponsors an administrative fee paid to TxDOT for oversight, many projects may have terminated their AFAs, but continued getting the project ready, assuming a new AFA would have to be executed anyways when projects are refunded. So my question's in two parts. One is about the scoring, and one is about, how TxDOT and CAMPO will work with projects that did cancel their AFAs. So will CAMPO and TxDOT staff work with project sponsors who terminated their AFAs in order to ensure the time necessary to re-secure the AFA and FPA does not penalize those projects in overall prioritization? And I'm really I want to understand, how this is going to be handled in the scoring, and then what kind of process there's going to be to work with folks to move those forward, moving forward. And we have a couple projects, I know at City of Austin, where we did terminate the AFA to not pay those costs at this point in time.
Understood, and thank you for your question. I think I understand it. And one thing I do want to point out that all of the projects that we have on the deferral list, I know the City of Austin canceled all of their AFAs, and then all of the other projects on the deferral list didn't have AFAs executed, and so really it won't penalize the city or anyone else as far as the AFA timeline goes in the readiness evaluation, because everyone is essentially starting at square one. And to answer your other question, is we will absolutely be coordinating with the city and the other sponsors and TxDOT continually throughout this process, because readiness and getting a project ready requires a lot of steps, and things change constantly. I don't think there's any project that every time you get into a right-of-way acquisition or the NEPA process, things change constantly, which really drives our need to really evaluate readiness continually on these projects. So that's definitely something that's why it's so important to do that. But yes, we will certainly be coordinating with the city and TxDOT. And again, yeah, we won't be penalizing anybody on as far as the AFA timeline goes.
Okay, but if they don't have an AFA, they won't be penalized.
No, because with the cancellation of the city's AFAs, there's no project on the deferral list that has an AFA, a current active AFA.
I thought Lakeline and West Runberg did have an active AFA. Is that not correct?
Lakeline, I know they had an AFA for the PE work, but I believe they canceled that AFA, and I believe y'all are moving forward with that project with local funding. And then y'all are going to redo an AFA for the construction funding when it's available. Runberg, I would have to go back and look. I don't believe that has an AFA.
Okay. Well, I mean, this gets probably a little more technical than I need to deal with at the board level. I just want to make sure that we're not penalizing projects that follow the direction of CAMPO and TxDOT with respect to the AFA, and wanted to seek clarity on that. And it sounds like they will not be penalized, and that you're expecting that they all have to go through this process. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I will say that this process will actually, nobody's going to get penalized on the AFA, but anybody, I think, like, for example, y'all are moving forward with the preliminary engineering, kind of completing the engineering work for Lakeline. And so projects like that, I mean, like basically every step up to construction, including the environmental analysis, are all things that a local government can do prior to the AFA and prior to getting refunded. And that's really, so this process will help anybody who's already continuing to invest and work on the projects that have been deferred will typically, I mean, that'll push them towards the top as far as the timeline, as far as getting refunded. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Thank you. That helps. Was there more that you wanted added there, or I had another question?
Oh, no, go ahead.
So I think that we have some projects that were originally awarded design and construction funding, and some that were non-construction projects. How is going to, is there going to be a difference in how you judge readiness across those two types of projects?
Yeah, so the readiness is really dependent on the phase. And as I mentioned earlier, if it's just design work, then the only thing that they need to do is have an AFA, and they're really ready to go at any point. The same thing with the studies. So I think the only one that, for the city of Austin at least, that had PE and construction funding was the Lakeline. I believe all of the other ones that were deferred are construction only. So that it really, but the phase does determine how we look at readiness.
Okay. And if any of the folks who are tasked with developing these projects want to get a better idea of how you're defining readiness so that they can be best position the projects, they should just get in touch with you and walk through it.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. And that's what we're going to be doing over the next couple of months, is really doing a deep dive with each sponsor. Similar to what we did when we refunded the Blake Manor Shade Use Path, is where we'll set up a call with the TxDOT area office with the managers there that are directly managing the project on their end, and then also the managers on the sponsor side. So we'll be providing updates to the board on a continual basis until this deferral list is refunded completely.
Thank you. And then when was this last presented to the TAC?
This was presented, I want to say November or December. I know it's sent out in a memo, so most recently, I believe.
Okay, so this one wasn't presented at the last TAC meeting. It was back in November or something.
I believe so, but I know it went out in the most recent memo that went out to the TAC. And I do want to, one thing I do want to clarify is this is the exact same readiness evaluation criteria that we used for the 2019-2022 call. So it's the same exact process. We're looking at the same stuff. So it's really just based on the project development process.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarifications on those specifics, and then the broader invitation there to know that you're going to be having those broader conversations. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
We can't hear you, Cynthia.
Oh, sorry. Are there any other questions?
Houston has a question.
Okay, I think that's Mayor Houston.
Yes, it is. Regarding the TAC, you said this went to TAC in November. Was that 2020?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, and did it come with recommendations to us today with TAC recommendations?
I think it was an information item. I don't believe there was a strict recommendation.
Okay, I recall I'm still kind of new here. Is there any particular reason why we wouldn't have TAC recommendations?
It just depends on if it's a policy item or not, but because this process was used back in the 2019-2022 call, I believe we took feedback on the process, but we didn't get an actual vote.
Okay.
And Mayor Houston,
Yes, sir.
We did take the item to TAC last year and at least twice, and Councilmember Kitchen asked about it again, and we sent the information back out to TAC again as part of a memo we sent out in January, and we asked each time for comment and suggestions on the process, and we didn't receive anything.
Thank you for that information.
Okay, Councilmember Kitchen.
I have a question related to what is the thinking with regard to distribution if related to like partial distribution, or can you just speak to that? Are we thinking that we will try to fully refund, or if there's not enough dollars to partially refund? Or, well, actually my question, I don't know if the answer to that is inherent in this criteria, or if that's something we'll just deal with when we determine how many dollars we have. I didn't see it written into the criteria, so.
Oh, no, ma'am. And I think you made a really good point, Vice Chair Kitchen, is that it's not inherent in that process. That may be something we can determine individually with the sponsors. If we partially fund it, will they be able to move forward with the project? They may have some additional bond funding or something that they can bring to the table and maybe able to move forward with the project. And I think that'll really determine whether or not we can partially fund it, if the sponsor's willing to make up the difference, or because I think if we partially fund it and they can't move forward with the project with, the additional funds or anything like that, then it's just going to sit there. And so if they can't, then I would imagine we'd need to wait until we can fully fund it. But I guess that'll really come out of the individual conversations we have with the sponsors.
So we're not voting today, one way or the other, on the extent to which we might partially fund something.
No, ma'am. It's really just the process, and we'll start utilizing that process. But the individual recommendations will come to the board as funding becomes available, and we can certainly have those discussions then, I think.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to clarify, that if there are instances such as that, then that'll be part of our conversations when we actually vote on the refunding of the dollars.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other is that Commissioner Shea?
Yeah, I had a question.
Go ahead.
It wasn't clear, Ryan, when you listed all of the various steps, if those were also part of the, I guess, matrix, and maybe that's too strong a word. I don't know if you have a mechanism for determining which aspects of readiness you will give how much weight. So for instance, I know a lot of our local jurisdictions will be having to really make tough decisions about where we spend money, particularly with revenue caps, and acquisition of right-of-way is a logical one to hold off on if, for instance, we don't know when there will be funding to be allocated through CAMPO. So if a jurisdiction has not pulled the trigger on the right-of-way acquisition process, which is time-consuming and expensive because of uncertainty about if and when there would be money available for a project. I would hate for that to be a reason for a location to be penalized in this readiness evaluation. So can you speak to that? Because I'm not clear if we're not going to hold the lack of an advanced funding agreement against anyone. What are we doing with some of these other variables that could be just as difficult and flexible?
So readiness is really, there's no like weights that you put on anything. I would per se, I guess you take an individual review of the projects, and to talk about right of way versus the AFA is a very strict, set process, and we know it's going to take 6 to 8 months to get that done. And because no one has an AFA at this point in the deferral list, everybody's kind of starting at the same starting block at the same spot, and so that's why nobody's going to get penalized. But right of way is one of those things, and I'm glad you actually brought that up, because right of way is typically in the project development process, along with environmental, the most difficult portion that kind of holds up a project. So if you look at a lot of the projects that take a long time to after funding to actually being built, right of way is almost always the area where things get bogged down essentially. And so I think it's important that local governments should be out there purchasing right away now, because we know that we're going to have additional federal funding coming in. We don't know when, but we know it'll be hopefully in the next few years. And right away sometimes can take years in itself to purchase, depending on property owners and things like that. So that's why we look at, and we looked at that when we initially awarded all of these projects that are on the deferral list. Most of them went through the 2018 project call. And that's why we really looked at right away. Is that something that they have purchased or not? And if they had the majority of it purchased, then we felt it was okay to fund those projects, because there was hardly anything left. But if they had a large swath of land that had not been purchased, acres and acres or whatever, for a new location roadway, for example, that could take years, and so it wouldn't do any good to fund those projects. At that point, they weren't simply ready, and so that's why that's such an important piece. But right away, I'm glad you brought that example up, and I don't know if that quite answers your question, but
well, I'm really interested to hear from my colleagues. I know, for instance, on the Anderson Mill 620 183 whole configuration, there are a lot of really thorny and complicated and expensive right-of-way decisions that need to be made depending on where the alignment is. But can I just get a sense of the board? Do your jurisdictions plan to go out and buy up right-of-way well in advance of even knowing if there's going to be funding for a project for years? I mean, I just know there's a lot of constraints on local budgets, so I'm curious to know if that is a workable assumption.
Commissioner Shea, we have been doing that, and I think in Williamson County, in partnership with the City of Cedar Park, City of Round Rock, Georgetown, and our local governments on projects that we're working on together. And then I know that, so for Ryan's example, if locally, and I'll because I see Corbin's face right now, I'll pick on Cedar Park, a project that we've worked on together. We jointly funded all of the engineering, the environmental, and right-of-way acquisition, and then the city, went for construction dollars through CAMPO. So that's a process that we use. I know they do that in Hayes County and other places around the state, because we don't always know when the construction dollars are coming. So the further we can get a project readied at the local level, the greater opportunity we'll have for construction dollars when it comes through CAMPO. That's just kind of what we do. And, I know Hayes County does similar type things as well.
No, that's correct. We're always trying to get the right of way and do as much engineering and get it shovel ready, because that just puts us farther ahead when these projects do come up.
Okay. I had heard when revenue caps came in that money for right-of-way acquisition was going to be a potential problem. Thank you.
Sure. Are there any other questions on this item? Okay, hearing none. Is there anybody against item number 6? Okay, so we'll, item number 6 passes unanimously. And I do want to note, I saw some other folks pop on right after we kind of did a roll call. So I think the only 2 that I see missing now are Mayor Hill and Judge Oakley. I think everybody else joined. And I'm also remiss in not welcoming Mayor Pro Tem Harper Madison. I understand that you are replacing Mayor Adler. Welcome. Sorry, I didn't do that at the beginning of the call. Please forgive me.
It's okay. Thank you for having me.
And then, so we will move on to item number 7. Ryan, I believe that is yours as well. Discussion on performance measure target updates.
Thank you, Chair Long. And so this item is a discussion on the performance measure targets. This is kind of an annual tradition that we do as part of our federal requirements. And so starting with just anybody who's unfamiliar with this process, starting with MAP 21, which is the federal authorization, I think, from 2012, and then most recently, the FAST Act that was continued in this, is that the federal government has really dictated that our investment decisions are really a performance-based kind of planning and programming twist to it. And so they really want us to understand how our investments are really impacting certain performance goals. And so on the left-hand side, you'll see the federal goals. That's, looks at safety, infrastructure, congestion, system, freight, environmental, and project delivery delays. And so that process, really, we wait for the FHWA and FTA go through the federal rulemaking process. And they, based on these goals, they'll set specific performance measures, which are the metrics that we use. And then we, as the state and designated recipients, as well as the MPOs, all set targets in these respective performance metrics. And then from that point, we plan and program accordingly. And so this is really something that's kind of started off in the last few years, and we're really just kind of hitting the ground with this performance-based approach. It's an evolving process. It changes every year, and the more information we have as we develop our processes for these, we'll be able to really look back and reflect on how well our investments are impacting the region within these goal areas. If you'll go to the next slide, please. So currently, the federal rulemaking process has dictated these 5 performance measures. This is just a quick summary, and I'm going to quickly go through these performance measures. But on the roadway side and FHWA, we look at the safety of our roadways. We also look at infrastructure, which looks at pavement conditions for the interstate highway system, the national highway system, and also bridges, whether they're on or off system. And then we also look at system performance, which really looks at travel time, reliability. And then on the transit side, FTA has set out metrics for transit asset management, which really looks at state of good repair. And then finally, this is a new requirement that we haven't seen yet, is the transit safety targets. And it's very similar to the roadway safety targets, but the designated recipients in the area are developing safety plans and setting targets in regards to their services. If you'll go to the next slide, please. So I do want to speak briefly about the safety performance targets. This is typically the one that gets the most discussion at the board level, and rightly so. Safety is incredibly important. And so currently the policy board supports the state's efforts. If you'll see, over the past 3 years, we've adopted the safety targets that are set by TxDOT. And so these targets are set annually, and typically the targets are based on the previous 5 years worth of data. And every year, 1 year, the oldest year drops off, and we add the newest year's data in. And so based on that, we adjust the targets accordingly based on that information and any kind of policy changes that may have happened at the commission level. And so one of the conversations that typically comes up is, the Vision Zero programs. I believe the city of Austin has one, and San Antonio, and whether or not we should set safety targets at 0 when it comes to fatalities. And so in response to that, TxDOT is actually, the commission has adopted the Road to Zero policy. And this is, so they've set some investment strategies. I believe they adopted this policy and then also allocated, I believe it was $600 million towards additional safety programs. But the goal of that is to reduce the number of deaths on Texas roadways by half by the year 2035 and to zero by the year 2050. And so the targets, you'll notice from the current target and the number of fatalities and the rate of fatalities is dropping off dramatically. And that is in response to that policy. And so we're eventually, working towards that goal of zero. And so that's only the road to zero policy has only impacted the number of fatalities and the rate of fatalities, that target. The other targets remain consistent with the previous year's methodology. And if you're not familiar with that methodology, essentially they project out based on the previous 5 years data, they project out what next year's numbers are going to look like. And then based on any of those numbers that look like they're going up, they set a 2% reduction of those current trends. So anything with a positive slope. And you'll notice they're anticipating, additional number of serious injuries, and even though the rate of injury is a little bit lower, and then a higher number of non-motorized fatalities. And the reason for that is TxDOT is we're all familiar that TxDOT is growing at an exponential rate. And so population is growing every single year, more people on the road. And so that will, that impacts the rate and number of serious injuries that we see. And so even though we're expecting or anticipating more, we are looking to reduce that anticipated amount by 2%. And so it's always worth a discussion when talking about safety. So it'll be interesting. I imagine this target will go even further down next year. So if you'll go to the next slide, please.
Ryan, can I ask a quick question?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, it's the Ryan show. You've been talking on me, so you get the intern and all our conversations too as well. But no, you were exactly on point, and that we had articulated. And I remember former Commissioner Doherty and Commissioner Shea had talked about this at length at several prior meetings about the road to zero. Now, one of the things that we wanted to do is we wanted to have a measurement where, in fact, it was ubiquitous across the board in our region. Have you seen any deviations from, or is there a deviation from the road to zero, from vision zero, from what you've seen from the city and the other areas with that, or are they synergistic? Are they analogous enough? I just want to make sure that when we're actually looking at this measurement, we all are on the same baseline regarding this.
I'll have to go back and look. I know the vision zero for at least the city, I think, is a little more aggressive than 2050. So I know everybody's really aiming for zero. I think the timing is a little bit different. And of course, the statewide target is obviously statewide, so they have a bigger thing to control, I think, than the city does. But everybody's looking for that zero goal. So I would say they're pretty synergistic. Vision zero from the city was adopted quite a bit earlier than the state, but the state is on board. The commission is really pushing for this safety. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but I can look into that some more just to compare, and I can certainly provide that at the next policy board meeting.
Good deal.
Ryan, if what might be helpful is if you could sort of poll the policy board member bodies and just ask each body if they've adopted something, because as we know, when we had this discussion during the open roads planning effort, it really safety is local, because it really requires each one of us working with our local law enforcement to a large effect. But if you could kind of poll the various local governments and maybe by our April meeting have an update for us on that, I think the policy board, I've heard enough questions that I think that would be useful.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
All right. My question, well, first of all, I appreciate the efforts to move towards performance measurement and management. I think that implementing those processes and expanding those processes will certainly pay dividends. When we're talking about different jurisdictions and whether they've been polled and how we've talked to them, my question is, have we worked with the technical advisory committee? Because they represent a number of jurisdictions that we're involved in, to get their comments and ideas about what's been put forward.
I know this. We've discussed the targets with the technical advisory committee in the past. I don't think these updates have. I don't think we've had a discussion with them. I know we sent it to them in a memo, but we will certainly I think in the next technical advisory committee meeting, we can talk with them about all of these targets and get their feedback on that.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions on this? And just as a reminder, this is just a discussion item. We're not voting on any of this.
Madam Chair.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Shea.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
When will this come back for any kind of?
Anticipating this to come back in March.
So will we have the benefit of the tax thoughts on it? This is a fairly complicated thing. And I had understood that our technical advisory committee was exactly for this purpose, to give us guidance on these kinds of technical issues. So will they have a chance to say grace over this and give us any guidance before the March meeting?
Absolutely. Yeah, we will certainly get this to the technical advisory committee and get their feedback on it. Because so. And I've got a few more. I do want to briefly go through the other safety or the other targets as well. But yeah, we will certainly get the tax feedback on this.
Excellent. That would be great. Thank you.
We're about to be in Lent anyway, Ryan. So grace is probably.
If there are no more questions about the safety targets, or I was just going to briefly go through the rest of the targets as well. If Emily, you can go to the next slide.
I had a question.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
This is Councilmember Alder. I had a question on when we will see. So these are the targets. Presumably, since they based the 5-year averages for the new targets on the 2020 numbers, when are we going to see what we did in 2020 relative to our current target?
This does reflect no, wait, actually the 2020 numbers come out usually around March, actually. I think it takes them about 3 months to compile that data. And then that'll go to the commission where they'll update their targets. And then, it's just that iterative cycle where every March the new numbers come in.
So when we pass this, will we be passing it with the updated numbers or with the numbers that you have here? Or is it a year lag?
There's about it's a 180-day lag typically. Well, I'd say it's almost a year lag because the numbers are updated in March and then the commission adopts them in August. And then I believe in August, we have 180 days, the MPO does, to update our targets accordingly. So we're always a little bit behind on this. But, next year will certainly be interesting because we're in the middle of the pandemic. And I think those numbers will be really interesting to see as far as safety goes.
Okay, so I would just ask that at the appropriate time, which I'm not sure from what you just said, when would be the most appropriate time? I believe we just started setting these targets, but I would like to make sure that we not only set the new targets, but are seeing how we performed. I just can't tell from what you just said exactly when we'll have that information.
And that's a really good point as far as telling how well we're doing on these targets. I mean, obviously we update the information, but I think one of the things that's really important and something that's going to take some time is correlating the investment decisions that we make as a policy board with achieving these targets. Because we know that, TxDOT allocated $600 million towards additional safety projects. And then you have to go out there and build them. And then it takes a couple of years worth of data to see how they impact, that particular roadway and how they impact the region overall. And so, this is something that's going to be a continual, evaluation process, I think, and we'll understand more the more data we have over time. But as far as the target setting, it's based on those 5 years. Anyways.
And then, as we're talking about this and the TAC, I don't know if next meeting is the appropriate time, but I think several jurisdictions have adopted Vision Zero and have some learnings about things. And it's a much broader process than just law enforcement. And there's a lot of how you construct the roadway and the intersections and other things like that, as well as behavior that you have to try and tackle if you want to really get to zero. And there may be things that we can learn and borrow from one another in that process.
Councilmember Alter, let me go back for a minute to your question about getting reporting data there. So I need to go back and double check, but I think the safety data that we get from the state is on a 5-year rolling average, but it does come out every year. But there's, as Ryan said, a little bit of a lag. To your question about, when will we start to see things coming out of these performance targets, whether we're talking about safety or some of the others, I have been thinking about that for a little while now. And what we are in the process of doing as CAMPO staff is trying to put together a dashboard that would be on the website. And so both the Policy Council and the general public will be able to see how we're making progress on the performance measures as we go through. And we're looking to have, actually, I'd already asked the staff to draft an RFP to put out on the street to go out for next month to hire a consultant to do that dashboard for us on several things, so that CAMPO can become more of a regional clearinghouse for information. So we're on it, is the short answer.
Great, thank you, because I think that those performance metrics would be really good for us to be able to easily see and track. And I understand we just moved to these targets, but it would like to. It's hard to have the current target and the new target, but not know where we are this year when it's a 5-year average. It would help us, not for the setting of the targets, but for understanding our trajectory to have that info. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ryan, if you want to continue, and we'll wrap this one up.
Okay, yeah, thank you, and thank you for those questions. So I just want to briefly go through the other targets. And so one of the other targets is the infrastructure targets that I had mentioned earlier, and this looks at the pavement conditions of the interstate highway system, as well as the national highway system, and then the bridge deck conditions. And so we currently support the state's efforts in their targets, and you'll see those over there on your left, and the new targets really changed that much. And these are statewide averages. One thing I do want to point out is that the infrastructure conditions in our region in particular are very, very good. I want to say we're up in the 90th percentile, so we are looking really good as far as those targets go. But this is a statewide average, but this, evaluates the general condition of the regional system. And these targets are updated every 4 years at a minimum, but TxDOT has decided to do an update to their targets on a midterm basis, and so we are updating these as well. So you won't see these next year, I don't expect. You'll see them again in 2023, it looks like. So if you go to the next slide, please. And then also we have the system performance targets, and this again, we support the state's efforts that the performance targets set by TxDOT. And this evaluates regional congestion by establishing travel time reliability targets, which is actually really interesting. Travel time reliability is really becoming one of those metrics that's becoming increasingly important when you look at congestion. It's not just how much congestion you have, it's just when is that congestion? Is it pretty consistent about when the roadway is congested? And as you can see, these new targets are actually pretty aggressive. It looks like we're going from 56.6% to a 70% travel time reliability on the interstate, and also the national highway system, and freight. And it looks like that's going down a little bit, and I believe that's because there's just that much more freight on the road. Obviously, COVID has accelerated how many Amazon trucks are on the road, so that's probably where that metric is coming from. But just wanted to update you on the system performance targets. And then, Emily, if you'll go to the next slide, I'll briefly.
Ryan, before we leave this
Yes,
slide, I just have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
It was really clear when we had to shift rapidly to work from home in March with the pandemic, that work from home, telecommuting had a dramatic impact on travel time, on congestion, on all of it. Do any of these targets include any assumptions about any shift to teleworking or other kinds of transportation demand management efforts?
I believe they, okay.
Commissioner Shea, the targets that you see right now probably don't have that in there. But we, CAMPO staff, because we saw such a dramatic reduction in, especially in peak period travel during COVID. And I don't know if you recall this or not, back early on, well, I shouldn't say early on, but in last fall, we went and we looked at the number of jobs in the region that lent themselves to some form of telework, whether it was full-time or even part-time. And we found, as you know, for a region, that percentage of jobs was high. It was over 50% is what I recall. And so we have since started looking at ways that we can work both with employers and others to see if we can make some of that permanent. I don't expect that, you know, everybody's going to keep on teleworking the way they are, but if we could just get folks to telework 1 or 2 days a week, that would make a big difference in getting more out of the system that we have. And I've got some ideas that I've been wanting to work through to see if we can start to look at when we're seeing congestion and where on certain roadways, and to see if we can work with employers and to see if we can manage the demand a little bit better on those roads in a more active way. So towards that end, we put an RFP out on the street. It's been a couple of months ago. It's been scored. That's going to come back to the board next month for consideration. But that's one of the things I'm looking at doing there. And then Councilmember Alter, going back briefly to your question about information and metrics and the data, the RFP actually went out on the street Friday.
Ashby, I would love to see that RFP if it relates to demand management and telecommuting. We are about to hire a consultant at Travis County because, as you know, led by Commissioner Doherty, Travis County adopted a direction to staff to achieve a goal of 70% plus 75% telecommuting on a permanent basis among eligible employees. And so we're going to be working with a consultant to build all the infrastructure and do some of the data analytics to really give us a pretty complete picture about how to make that sustainable on a permanent basis. And we'd be happy to share that information with you. But I'd love to know, when you said we did an RFP, what was it for? Related to telecommuting, related to any kind of demand management? Or
it was related to any kind of demand management in particular. So
is that something you could email me? I'd love to see it.
Yes, ma'am. Well, you'll have it by tomorrow.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Great. I'm so glad. I'd not heard that statistic that our region has the potential for over 50% telecommuting, because that's the cheapest, fastest way to reduce congestion.
Yes, ma'am.
Make more capacity. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Go ahead, and I think you've got 2 more slides.
Yes, ma'am. I'll go through these quickly. And so moving on to the transit side, we have the transit asset management targets. And so direct recipients of FTA 5307 funding adopt a transit asset management plan. And in that plan, they have performance measures and targets. The direct recipients in the region include Cap Metro, the city of Round Rock, and the city of San Marcos. The city of San Marcos leases their vehicles, so they don't have to do an asset management plan yet. But the city of Round Rock and Capital Metro have set their targets. And you'll see those targets previously, we've only had Capital Metro's targets. I believe they did their first transit asset management plan a couple of years ago. And Round Rock just recently completed theirs last year. And so we're going to average out those TAM targets and set those as the regional targets. And so we're currently we support those direct recipient efforts and have adopted that regional average. And so we're going to continue. We're going to make that recommendation again. And just transit asset management really looks at the state of the capital that these transit agencies own. This includes the vehicles and as well as the rail and also facilities, and just really looks at the general condition just to ensure that most of these are in good condition, and they set targets for those that exceed it. And then if you'll go to the next slide, please. And then finally, this is a new performance measure in the federal rulemaking process completed last July. And again, it's the 5307 funded recipients in the region. They adopt a public transit agency safety plan, which includes transit safety targets. And like roadway, it kind of looks at the same metrics, including number of fatalities, rate of fatalities, injuries, safety events, and then mechanical failures as well. And so we've got Capital Metro, the city of Round Rock, and San Marcos, and we'll be averaging out the safety targets by the direct recipients in the region. We do have the targets you see here are the average between the city of Round Rock and the city of San Marcos. I'm still waiting on Capital Metro's targets. I'm not sure if they've completed their plan yet, and To that end, I do want to say that the FTA has granted an extension because of COVID on the requirements for the PTA SP, having a hard time with that acronym. So we may not receive those targets until July, but I will certainly, if they have them and we get them, we'll average them into this, but we'll bring those to the board as soon as we do. They've all been really good about coordinating with us on these. And so that concludes all of the performance measures. Again, we'll take this to the Technical Advisory Committee for their feedback. And then again, we'll be bringing this back in March for adoption. And then these targets are incorporated into our Transportation Improvement Program, as well as our Regional Transportation Plan. And that concludes my presentation. If there are any other questions, I'll stop talking. Thank you all for your patience.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that. We will move on now to item number 8, which is the Executive Director's Report. And Ashby, if you want to take over.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So briefly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about last month. I told you we will be coming back to you about the amounts that came out of the Federal CARES Act bill. And Ryan went over a little bit of this earlier, so I'm not going to take much time on it. So that bill was passed last December, and in it, it contains some direct suballocated funding to CAMPO that comes through TxDOT. And that funding is consistent and eligible for the same things that Category 7 funding is eligible for. So the tables have been produced, and CAMPO will get $15 million out of that. That was one of the things that Ryan was saying earlier, that we're going to check with TxDOT and just check on the cash flow issues, but I don't anticipate that being a concern for us. So this sort of leads me into the next item. Last month also, we told you that we will be bringing an item forward. It's a draft calendar of things we think might be happening at CAMPO board meetings throughout the year. Thanks for pulling that up. And you know, at this point, these are just the things that we know, and it's mostly based on the routine plan and tip amendments that we do in the spring, but there's some other things in there. And we'll start filling this in as we get more information on things. So, for example, once we finish talking to both project sponsors and to TxDOT on CARES Act money, then we'll have items in there where we'll be asking the board to allocate that funding to deferred projects. So this is just to give you a sense right now of the major things that we anticipate throughout the year. And like I said, we'll keep that updated and put that out there. And maybe in the spirit of the dashboard concept that I talked about, we need to put this on the website, and we'll just update it as we get more information.
So thank you, Ashby. And the item number 9, the only other announcement that I have is the subcommittee on the bylaws met, and I believe they are, as the committee, finalizing their report, and that should come back at our next meeting. We have a TAC meeting on February 26th, and our next policy board meeting will be on March the 8th.
Chair, I think there may be a few questions for Ashby on item 8.
Okay, sorry, I didn't.
That's all right. I know it's hard for you to see. Yeah. I'll let others go first. I have one, but I think someone else from our team may have one. Councilmember Ellis.
I had my hand up for a second, but I know you probably couldn't see me.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That's all right. On the chart that Ashby created and shared with us, which I really appreciate, the TDM consultant selection shows up in March. Given that we have information coming from the Census Bureau in the next couple of weeks, how will newly available census information be incorporated into the TDM? And will there be a third-party peer-reviewed audit? Just because I know demographics and trying to understand these models has been a topic on a lot of people's minds in a lot of different regional planning efforts.
Thank you, Councilmember Ellis. And so one of the things we committed to, I believe it was last year, in one of the policy board meetings, was when the new census data came out, we were going to take a fresh look at the demographic forecast that we have produced about a year or so ago. And so, we're still committed to doing that. And that would also lace itself into the TDM item. So if you look at the draft scope of work, one of the first things it does is talk about going back and taking reviews of previous work, looking at work that others done, and also looking at things like census data. So it will be worked into the scope. And what was the other part of the question, Councilmember?
Will there be a third-party peer-reviewed assessment of those forecasts?
So typically what we have done, whether we're talking about our travel demand model or we're talking about the demographic forecast, is we will work both with TxDOT's Transportation Planning and Programming division, but we also work through Texas Transportation Institute. And they provide a third-party check over things.
Okay, and is that something that will come back to the policy board for review?
Which thing, Councilmember?
Once the Texas Transportation Institute reviews it, is that something that
yes, ma'am,
we'll be able to review at least before it's finalized?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then is the RFP for the TDM going to be the exact same group doing it as the telecommuting that we were talking about on a previous item? Or are those different contracts, different RFPs?
It was intended to be one contract.
One contract. Okay, that's helpful.
All right. Are there any other questions?
I have a quick one, Chair Long.
Okay, go ahead, Councilmember Kitchen.
Okay, just quickly. So Ashby, just so I understand, in response to Councilmember Ellis, the demographic review is, when do you anticipate that at this time? Do you have an anticipated time for that? I'm not sure.
I don't. And I was a little bit surprised because Councilmember Ellis was the second person I heard say we were going to get census data in 4 months, because I thought it was going to be much longer than that, to be honest with you, because the last thing I saw was that the Census Bureau hadn't even delivered the numbers to Congress yet. And so they can't send them out to us until after Congress has seen them and approved them, was what I thought. But I'm going to now dig into this.
Yeah, I think I saw that April 15th was the date that the Census Bureau is not allowed to release anything prior to April 15th. So I'm not sure beyond that date what the timeline expectation is, but just wanted to be on the forefront of when that information is available.
And Ashby, to Councilmember Ellis's point, I've heard that for apportionment purposes, we will be getting census data around that time period, probably mid to late April or so. And then after that, we'll be getting, let's be blunt, everyone's looking at redistricting. There were real information regarding that later on in July or so, August.
Okay, so Councilmember Kitchen, based off that information, we'll have to see what we get out of the census information, but we will certainly start looking at it in the summer. Here's the thing I've been concerned about for the better part, well, since the census count started, because they're doing so many things differently than the way they've done them in the past. We're going to have to, and it's not just us, we're going to have to spend a fair amount of time going through that data and making sure that we understand what the faults are with the data, and then work on ways to work around the faults. And like I said, that's a conversation I've been having nationally with folks. And but I know I'm rambling. So we're going to start on it this summer.
Okay. Any other questions?
I would just ask that if you would just, as a placeholder, put that item on your schedule, just so that we can, understanding that you'll have to adjust it as you learn more, but it would be helpful to have it on. Would that be okay, Ashby? Can you do that?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and I think all of our jurisdictions, I know, those that are involved with redistricting, our folks in our GIS group are kind of updating us with the latest and greatest, and that's in line with what Councilmember Mateo said, is what we've heard also.
very last thing, Chair, and this will just be for one very quick, is that I noticed that we have the UPWP amendment in March. Can you give us an idea of what we might be expecting on that?
That one will be fairly simple. So Capital Metro needed us to put a study in because it's required under federal rules that it be included in the UPWP. And so we're asking for the amendment to handle that.
Okay, and that's the only thing you're anticipating, I take it?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I've already done my announcements, so we'll move to item number 10, adjournment.
So moved.
Second. Second.
Okay,
Yeah,
and
I'll take time back any day of the week.
all right, so we're going to go with unanimous consent on that, and we'll conclude this meeting at 3:22. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.